Right, we're here today at Weston Pools Fishery up in Oswald Street. What I've done, I've come to a standard commercial with a nice mixed stocking of fish. And what I want to do is run you through the way I approach my peg, the areas that I fish in my peg, the way I swap around the areas of my peg, and how I keep fish feeding all through the session. I'm going to use a variety of methods and baits to try and keep small fish coming in the harder parts of the match, and then big fish coming when I need to. It's going to be a real mix about all throughout the day, and I want to show you all the rigs I use and the way I feed the baits with those rigs. Right, well, the first area of the peg that I'm going to target today is going to be my shore pole line. This is a really common line that gets fished on most commercials these days. It's generally somewhere on that near slope. I don't like fishing at the base of the slope. I always like coming up a little tiny bit onto the hard bottom. This is the area that I'm going to start my match on. I tend to like starting this area with pellets. I find it a nice, easy bait to use. It's not too selective, but it's still got a good chance of catching me some better stamped fish that may be feeding there at the start of the match. To approach this line, I have a nice, really simple rig. So what I've got a nice 4x14 float. The depth is around 3.5 to 4 foot. So a 414 gives me plenty of shot down the line. So I've got a little bit to keep hold of if the wind starts moving my float about. Keeps everything nice and still. But if my pellet's moving about and my loose feed isn't, then I'm not going to get as many bites as I should be doing. So what I have, as I say, a nice 4x14 float on that. And it's simply shotted with a spread bulk of number 9 shot. Really nice and simple. So it's going to get my bait down and it's going to show me bites up really clearly. Because it's big shots that the fish are going to disrupt big shot. They're going to have nice positive bites. They're going to show everything up nice and clear. So I want to start this line. Simply, I'm going to band a hard 6mm pellet. So I much prefer using bands. I find it nice and quick to get my bait on. I'm going to stretch that elastic a bit. We've got a nice soft elastic. And all I want to do to start my session is place my rig in and feed 6 pellets over the top. What I'm after on this line is to sort of get an understanding of how my match is going to go. By not committing myself to any other areas and throwing bait in, I can get a very good understanding whether it's going to be a really good day or whether I'm going to have to struggle. So by doing that, I've not fed any volumes of bait in any other areas of my peg, and I can watch everyone else and I can see what happens. So how I want to feed this, just keep feeding 4 or 5 pellets. What I'm after, it's the bait falling through the water. That's what's important. It's a little bit of noise and the bait falling through the water. That's what's attractive to the fish. Just keep him nice. By feeding 3 pellets over my float all the time. So while I'm doing this, I like to watch other people around me and see what they're doing. A lot of people will go for it straight away on shallow lines, on long lines. I like to see the response that they're getting before I commit to that myself, and it gives me a better understanding of how I need to feed my other lines. So also by feeding just this short line to begin with, I feel that any fish that are within a few meters of my peg, they've only got one option to feed. This is the only area of bait that I have in the whole of my peg. So if a fish is wanting to have a chew, this is where I'm going to catch it. Creates a slightly greater level of competition for that small amount of bait, instead of having lots of areas of fish all over my peg if I'd have fed bait in advance. I'll never ever start this line either with a big pot of bait. Again, that comes down to creating the more competition in my peg. Ooh, I missed the bite then. So if I were to feed a big pot of bait to start my peg off, then if I feed, say, 100 pellets in that big pot, I feel that gives me a 100 to 1 chance of getting a bite with it picking my pellets out. If I'm feeding just 3 or 4, then obviously my odds are greatened and I've got much more chance of a fish finding my hook bait and me getting a quick start in the match. What I will try and do is when I feed my pellets, I'll feed them, probably give it 5 or 6 seconds, and then I'll just lift my float and drop it in. What I'm trying to do is put my bait in with the pellets that I've just loose fed. So I don't want to waste too much time lowering my rig all the way through the water. So just by concentrating on that last 12 inches, that's where hopefully the fish are going to be feeding, and I'll get nice clean bites then, and the fish will stay near the bottom. Right, well what I'm finding at the moment is it's quite difficult on this line. I'm only getting a few bites from small fish at the moment, to be honest though. We've booked a slightly decent one here. But what I've started doing now, I've slowly started feeding my casters on my long line. Yeah, ooh, that was foul up, that one. There's a little medal. So I'm just starting to feed them casters. What I need to give myself is an area to go as quickly as possible. To say, I don't just want to jump on a line and expect it to work. So by staying on this short line and feeding a little bit of bait long now, I can give myself somewhere to go without the pause in having to wait for the fish to arrive on that line. I can simply go straight out there, and there should be a few fish waiting on my loose feed for me. What I'm going to try and do is just catch one more. Literally have one more cast on this short line, hopefully come back with a fish. And then there should be a few fish feeding on that longer line which I'm feeding. So to keep my long line going, I'm just feeding 10 to 15 casters on it constantly, with a view to catching shallow and on deck on it. Yeah. My biggest issue is having a shallow line without a bottom line. Too many people do it and you miss out on a lot of fish that are feeding on the bottom. I'm only feeding those 2 areas of my peg at the moment. I'm still going to keep on feeding my pellets short because it can work as a nice line to drop back on. Just one quick fish and then back to where you're going. It's all about rotating lines and keeping them going. So I'll never dismiss this line altogether. Right, we're going to give this line a little rest. So we're going to move on to that next line that we fed with the casters. What I'm going to do, that line is really meant for shallow fishing. So I have my 2 shallow rigs ready for that. We're going to come on to them in a minute. How I like to start my line is by trying on the bottom first. By starting on the bottom, it'll give me the best of both worlds. It'll let me know whether there's fish actually feeding shallow in my peg. I've also got a really good chance of catching a fish on the bottom. So I'm going to bait that up. I'm just going to put 2 maggots on a size 16, a nice big hook because I'm expecting some barbel. This rig's a bit bigger, it's a 4x16 float, and I've simply got a great big bulk of number 8 shot, just above a 6-inch hook length, and 1 number 8 on the hook length. My shot's probably 10 inches away from my hook, so it's really going to get it down. I'm not going to mess about with a slow falling rig that I'm going to miss bites with, and it's going to take me a long time to put my rig back in the water. This is going to be a rig that gets straight down to the deck, catches me a fish. I can be really, really quick and positive, in and out with a fish every time. I'm just going to ship out to where them casters are. I'm going to put my bulk in, put my float right on top of my bulk to get my rig down as fast as possible, and then give it a good handful of casters over the top of it. So once my rig's settled, it'll actually tell me whether there's any fish up in the water. So what I can do by settling my rig, I can watch my bristle. By feeding over the top of it, if I get any indications really quickly, then I know that there's fish much higher up in the water than my hook bait. Well, we got a bite there, that was on the bottom. Just check that hook bait, it looked a little bit damaged. No. And again, I keep on continuously feeding that line because, as I said, I do want to build it up as a shallow line. There seems to be a few fish there. I'm getting quite a few indications. There's even the odd swirl in the peg as well, telling me there's some fish shallow. So what it's all about now is me making the right decisions as quickly as possible. I don't want to be spending time on the wrong rig when there's fish to be caught at other levels or other areas of my peg. So it's very noticeable. Look, while I'm feeding these casters, there's quite a lot of indications up in the water now. There's a couple of swirls, there's definitely some fish in my peg. So I'm going to give this a quick 20 seconds, see if I come back with a fish. And if not, we're going straight out there with the shallow rig, see what happens. What I can also tell by when I'm feeding, I'm getting the indications very, very quickly on my float. That tells me the fish are really, really high up in the water. So what I'll do with my shallow rigs, I have 2 shallow rigs set up for this situation. During a match, I may set up 3, 4, even 5 shallow rigs, all depending on how cautious the fish are feeding. So what I've got two rigs there, both 4x10s floats, both on my shallow kits as well. I find these really good for landing fish really quickly. You'll see that when we start in a minute. So as I say, 2 4x10s floats, and what I'm after this short length of line in between my float and my pole. That's why I can't just have one rig and move it up and down on my line. I need 2, and I need to maintain this short 5 to 6 inches with all my rigs. So at the moment I've got a rig set at 1.5 foot and 2 foot. On a different day I may have one set at 1 foot and 3 foot also, just so I can chase the fish up and down in the water. So what I'm going to start with, because I'm seeing a few fish there, I'm going to start with a smaller rig. That's set at around 1.5 foot. Again, really nice soft elastic, so I'm going to hook a lot of small fish, and I want my elastic to cushion all the fish I'm going to catch. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to fish a banded maggot on this. I find a banded maggot for fishing for mixed species, for eyed, F1, tench, far better than hooking a maggot. I find I miss a lot less bites. Just going to pop that banded maggot on there. So that's generally good now for 10, 20, possibly even 30 fish without me having to change my bait. That can make me even more efficient, so I can catch a few more fish in that time. I'm trying to do just by changing my float a couple of inches each time. I want to try and find the happiest depth at the moment where the fish want to feed. That'll change all throughout the day. There's never a fixed depth that's best for fish. See, right, dropping a little bit lower, then that one's pulled my elastic out and hooked itself. See, the short tops are brilliant for landing these fish really quick. I can just give it 3 nice pulls and then the fish will pop up really close to my nest, really easy. And there's no chasing the fish about around the peg. Also, you'll see with that banded maggot, it very rarely even enters the fish's mouth, so it doesn't get damaged, allowing me to catch a lot more fish. Another one. Big lad, that one. See, all the while that I'm feeding that shallow line, I'm also building up the line on the bottom. Any casters that manage to get past these eyed, it's building a nice line up that I can catch plenty of barbel on and other fish. They're going to fill in the gaps. That's a really good eye. That's probably £3, that one. Woohoo! See, again, the maggot's not bust. I'm just going to pull it on the band just so it's central again. The line's really starting to build up now. I'm getting quite regular bites. I'm missing a few less bites now as well, now that you find the right depth. Same again, 3 pulls on the puller kit. Keep it nice and low until the fish is very close. Lift it up and it's there for netting straight away. All the while that I'm feeding that shallow line, I'm still dropping a few pellets short. And then later on in the session, I'll also start building an edge line. I don't believe in feeding a line for too long before I go on it. So I feel that once these 2 lines are showing signs of going a little bit quieter, then I'll bring that edge line into the game. Again, that'll just be fed with loose fed maggots and casters. Right, now that this line's gone quiet again, what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly come in. I'm going to drop straight onto the bottom. Hopefully that should give me a good chance of catching a quick fish on the bottom. What it'll also do is allow me to rest my shallow line. So hopefully build the confidence up a little bit. Once I've caught a few of them, you can get a little bit finicky with your bite, missing a few bites or getting less bites. So by just leaving them alone a bit, letting them regroup, I can come straight back and have a good run shallow hopefully, once I've come back with a fish off the deck. So a modern commercial has to be a really busy way of fishing. You can't just settle with waiting for big fish to come. You need to adapt and keep fish coming at as many different lines as possible, and by ringing the changes as quickly as you can. Hopefully that'll allow you to put a lot more fish in the net. So going back on this rig, it shows us just how many fish are still in the peg. The rig's constantly getting indications on it. So what it could be a good idea to do next time is to drop down on that deeper shallow rig that I've got, set at about 2.5 foot. And quite possibly there might be a few fish waiting for me on that one. Right, so after a quick go on my deck line, I haven't had a bite. But again, I'm getting a lot of indications on that bottom line with fish up in the water. So again, what I'm going to do this time is swap to me deeper Yeah, deeper shallow rig. So this is a slightly deeper rig, probably set at about 2 to 2.5 foot. So judging by the rig on the bottom, there's clearly a lot of fish in the peg. But I don't think there's too much bait getting to the bottom. So there must be fish to be caught shallow. I just need to work out whereabouts in the peg is the best place for me to be. That's a proper bite. So at all times I'm just maintaining that little trickle of pellets on my short line just to keep a few fish interested. I'm never feeding a volume of bait, just 2 or 3 pellets always going in, allows me to drop on there and catch the odd fish throughout the day. Again, swapping back to the shallower rig again now. What you need to find as quickly as possible during your session is the best sort of places to be spending your time. So after probably half an hour of experimentation at the start, you'll have a very clear idea of what's going to happen during the day, where the fish want to be, and you can concentrate a lot more on that or those rigs and cut out the quiet periods like we just had, fishing rigs that aren't right at that time. What I am going to do now, I'm going to slowly start feeding a little bit of bait in my edge line. Because I've still not got anywhere that's producing fish consistently, I need to find myself somewhere that I can use to rotate that I'm always going to put a few fish in my peg. So hopefully by feeding some maggots and casters down there, I may be able to catch some smaller fish, some barbel, some tench, just in this quiet time when the fish aren't quite feeding properly. So that's just fed simply loose feeding all the time. Whenever I feed out there, I'm going to feed a little bit down the edge also. Eventually we've had one on that. It's a little bit better, this feels like the first F1. Here we go, once I've done that 3 pulls, I know that I'm within netting range now, and I can just lift up, wait for the fish to pop up. Like an F1 or a small carp. A small carp, that one. Yeah, the maggots good to go. What I would expect is that the shallow line takes quite a while to sort of develop. You're going to catch some hide and a bit of everything, to be honest, to start with, before later on in the day, hopefully F1s, possibly carp, they'll really take over the peg and start feeding confidently. What I need to do in the meantime is catch as many other fish as I possibly can, meaning swapping them lines about, nicking a fish off each. So trying to come back with a fish every 2 or 3 minutes, hopefully just to build that weight up before they really rock up in the last hour. Right, so the peg's changing a little bit now. It's clear that it's not going to be really good for a while, but there's definitely fish to be caught. I've had to cut back on my feeding quite a bit. What that does, it creates more competition for that little bit of bait that I'm putting in. What I've got at the moment is quite a few eyed in the peg, which I find that the eyed are very much a gorge feeder, and that they come in your peg, eat everything that's available, and then you tend to stop catching them very quickly. So what I need to do, I need to maximise the amount of time that them eyed are going to be in my peg for. So by cutting down on the bait, hopefully I'm going to give them a little bit less and keep them there for a little bit longer. So I've also found it's best to be a little tiny bit deeper. I'm fishing at the full length of me 2-foot rig. And that definitely seems to be best. Also waiting a little bit longer for a bite. Generally when I'm fishing shallow, I like to be slapping constantly and keeping my bait falling through the water. But what I'm finding today is by probably waiting 6 or 7 seconds, I'm getting a few more bites as it's hung there. And they're often off better fish as well, eyed up to, possibly up to £3 nearly. Right, well the other line's gone a little bit funny at the moment, it's gone a bit quiet. and for some reason I'm really struggling to catch on the bottom today. It must be something to do with the pressure, or I think the fish have got other things on their minds. So what I need to do, I need to try and get this edge working as well. I've been slowly feeding a few casters down there and a few maggots. Again, just to try and catch anything I can. So I'm going to start using it now as my line, just to rest my shallow line, because I've got nowhere else producing fish in my peg. I need somewhere that I can let that build up. Otherwise I'm going to be sat there making my peg worse and worse and worse by catching the last few fish that are feeding instead of letting them gang up again. So what I want to do down the edge, I want to try and keep fish on the bottom and feed quite big handfuls every now and again to push the fish down. The last thing I want is tiny bits of bait going there all the time and the fish whizzing up in the air. That'll cause me to get liners and foul up a few fish. So while I'm doing that, I need to keep my shallow line going. A few casters on that. Just like that. Guiding right round so I can't get under the pallet. I'm not trying to rush the fish, just wait till it pops up. So if I try and pull a bar, well, often they pull back twice as hard and they're going to end up going underneath my pallet and underneath my net, and I'm going to end up losing it. Just being nice and patient with it, wait until it's done. Hopefully it'll pop up and we'll have him. Well, with a couple of minutes spent down the edge, it's a good 3 to 4 pounder barbel. I caught one! Greedy, just one more please, come on. Oh, we got one. Nice tench out the edge line. What I'd like to show you dead quick is the rig that I'm using down the edge. What I've got a 4x14 float. I'm needing that because I've got nearly 4 foot of water in the edge. It's a very steep bank as well. There's no shelf down the edge here at Weston. What I'm forced to do because of that is to have a great big bulk 3 inches away from my hook. What this allows, it allows me to swing my rig right into the edge, onto the right angle, if you like, of where the bank finishes and the bottom starts. That's probably the line that all the fish are going to feed on, and it's where I'm going to get most of my clean bites. If I come away from that edge, then I'm going to find I foul hook a lot more fish, because all the bait will accumulate right against the edging of the bank, if you like. And that's where it's going to be the best place for me to be fishing to get proper bites off the fish. I say it's a nice simple rig. We're fishing 0.14 hook length, so 16 main line, so nice and durable for the fish we're going to catch. And as I say, a nice heavy float that's going to keep still, and it's not going to mess about when the fish are knocking it all over the place. Another really good barbel from down the edge. It's well worth spending spending that little bit of time if the fish are going to be that big. Right, we've had another great session here at Weston Pools. A little bit tricky to start with. It surprised me how hard it was, to be honest. But it's been a really good example of how I've got to keep rotating them lines. If I wasn't to keep swapping about, I'd have put very little in my net, and possibly I wouldn't have built my lines up at all, because I do feel that having a rig in the same peg for too long definitely stops fish settling on that bait that you're feeding. But overall, it's been great. I've probably fished 20 different areas of my peg during the day. Oh, sorry, I've rotated 20 different lines over my 3 areas all day. But slowly it's kept fish coming, and it's got better and better at the end, ending up with some really nice big fish. Another great day at Weston Pools. Right, let them go, and hopefully catch me again in the next match.